been listening to the great music of Stream Beats. That's music that's provided by Harris Heller over at Alpha Gaming. And he just has a ton of great music over there that you can add to your streams or your YouTube videos. It's copyright free, and you'll never get a strike against you using that music. Harris Heller makes music for gamers. He's a gamer himself, so it's a great win-win over there. All right, today on Monster Monday, we are going to be looking at one of the most iconic monsters in all of D&D lore. That is, of course, the Mind Flayer. Today is March 8th, 2021. I'm your host, DM Galabond. As always, we like to shout out to Mo over the Tabletop Bellhop. Mo is the OG when it comes to all things tabletop gaming. He has news, reviews, links to buy, industry links, podcasts, video streams, you name it, all related to any kind of tabletop game you can imagine, from your traditional tabletop RPGs to card games, party games, board games, whatever. Mo has it, so go check him out over at the tabletopbellhop.com. But as for us, we are going to begin our deep dive into the Mind Flayer. And while you're watching tonight, go ahead and throw any questions you have about Mind Flayers into the comments. We might actually cover it in what we're going to talk about, but when we get to the end, if we haven't covered it, we'll go ahead and see if we can find some answers to your questions about the Mind Flayer at that point in time. All right. The Mind Flayer, also known as the Illithid, is one of the creepiest looking and weirdest and most frightening creatures in all of D&D. They're humanoid in appearance, but they have an octopus-like ridged head with 4 tentacles surrounding a lamprey-like mouth. They're warm-blooded amphibians whose blood has silvery white color. Hands have long reddish fingers and lack index finger. Feet are two-toed and webbed. Mind Flayers are extremely sensitive to bright light. Consider it painful characteristic that some Gith-Yankee scholars attribute to the fact that their alien anatomy focused light in a strange way. The vision is more sensitive to the recognition of geometric patterns than that of other humanoids. Now, another possibility about Mind Flayers is that they developed in or they evolved in places where there was not much light, because on the material plane you very often find colonies of Mind Flayers, I guess adjacent to the material plane you encounter colonies of Mind Flayers in the Underdark. The creepy realm where the Drow and the Duergar and all kinds of other nasty things live. Mind Flayers have a very specific diet, the brains of humanoids, most often plucked from a living victim, which instantly kills the victim. Mind Flayers that are healthy from brain-rich diets excrete a kind of slimy mucus substance that coats their mauve skins. Okay, now you get a sense of why they're creepy. Not only do they look creepy, but they eat brains. Brains. All right. Now, let's dig a little bit into the lore about this, and we're going to look very much more in depth later on, but just kind of hitting some highlights here. Their horrific alien humanoids lurk deep within the Underdark. They're masters of psionic energy, use mental powers to dominate other creatures. Fortune among their victims are slain almost immediately, their brains devoured. Unlucky ones have their psyches warped, leaving them as mindless slaves with little hope of being rescued. Despite all their unique and overwhelming abilities, Mind Flayers are a race on the edge of extinction. Thousands of years ago, the Illithids were the dominant powers of the inner planes. From their astral domains, they launched flying vessels called nautiloids, able to cross between planes so that they could harvest intelligent humanoids from hundreds of worlds. The Gith were once a race enslaved to the Illithids. They have since risen up, overthrown their former masters, and escaped with much of their technology, and now they hunt Mind Flayers relentlessly. So, the Githyanki are a horrifying race of humanoids on their own, and often referred to in polite society as space pirates because of their ships that can travel through the astral sea and across different planes, and they go and they raid different planets or different worlds, different planes. They take slaves, and they have those silver greatswords that can sever the astral cord and slay both the astral and physical body of a traveler on the astral planes. But what Githyanki live to hunt more than anything else are Mind Flayers, because Mind Flayers once enslaved their entire race. Alright, so Mind Flayers live in colonies. All members of the colonies are connected telepathically by an organism called an Elder Brain. It's a gigantic exposed brain with powerful psionic abilities, but it needs other people to protect it from physical harm because it is almost, physically, it's almost completely defenseless on its own. Its only defense is a psychic defense. Alright, so we talk every week about how creatures in D&D all have a creature type, and Illithids or Mind Flayers are aberrations. Aberrations are truly alien. A lot of them have innate magical abilities. In this case, all the magical abilities of the Mind Flayers are psionic in nature. The psionics is the power source and the damage type, if you will. Or psychic, it's psychic damage, and then psionics is the power source for that damage. And those abilities are drawn from the creature's alien mind rather than mystical forces of the world. Quintessential aberrations are aboleths, beholders, Mind Flayers, and slods, or sloddy. Alright, now, this is the part of the show where we actually go and we delve into the actual resources from the current and past editions of D&D to talk about what Mind Flayers have been like throughout the history of D&D, what they're like now, and then what you can use to sort of pull into your own game. So, Mind Flayers first appeared in AD&D or first edition D&D. They are rare creatures. 1 to 4 of them would appear at a time. They have 4 attacks, including psionic attacks. They are considered evil creatures. They're found only in subterranean places. They detest sunlight, greatly evil, and consider the bulk of humanity and its kin as cattle to feed on. The physical attack is striking the victim with 4 tentacles. If tentacle hits, it will reach the opponent's brain in 1 to 4 melee rounds and draw it forth, immediately killing the creature. The Mind Flayer then devours the brain. More feared attack is a mind blast of psionic power. And then first edition had a very robust, and I would urge you, if you are into psionics, I'd urge you to go out to the DM's Guild website and get yourself the PDF copies of the Trinity of first edition books. So the DM's Guide, the Monster Manual, and the Player's Handbook, because there are entire appendices in those devoted entirely to the science of psionics and how that is manifest. If you want to use psionics in your game, there's more resources in that edition, and you can kind of figure out how to adapt it to your own table, regardless of what edition you're playing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at your table if you strictly follow the rules. As long as the DM and all the players are having fun, it's good. So feel free to go to the DM's Guild and get those resources. They're very cheap now. And, when they came out 30, 40 years ago, they were $50, but now they're sold through Wizards of the Coast on the DM's Guild for like $10 each. So it's not very expensive to get those now. They have their own arcane language, several other weird tongues, purportedly those of terrible races, of things which dwell in regions of the subterranean world. Mind Flayer's skin glistens with slime. Its color is a nauseous mauve, tentacles being purplish black. Mind Flayer's eyes are dead white, no pupil being evident. 3 long fingers of each hand are reddish, but the hands are mauve. And so here's a depiction of the Mind Flayer blasting a party with its psionic abilities. Okay, so then in 2nd edition, they're still considered subterranean, very rare. They have a community or a colony. Their diet is exclusively brains. Evil and feared creature, the Underdark. They stand about 6 feet tall, have hideous mauve skin that glistens with slime. Mind Flayer's preferred method of attack is the Mind Blast, projected in a cone 60 feet long and 5 feet wide at the Mind Flayer and 20 feet wide at the opposite end. All within the cone must make a saving throw versus wands or be stunned and unable to act for 3d4 rounds. And the Illithid tries to grab 1 or 2 stunned victims and escape with them. And then it keeps some victims as slaves and feeds on the brains of the others. While devouring the brain of the stunned victim, it inserts its tentacles into the victim's skull, draws out the brain, killing the victim in 1 round. Mind Flayer can also use tentacles in combat. And then there's information about the arcane powers that it has. And they live in underground cities or colonies of 200 to 2,000 Illithids, plus at least 2 slaves per Mind Flayer. Slaves are under the effect of a charmed person or charmed monster and obey their Illithid masters without question. Now, here we get the first reference to the Elder Brain. In a pool of briny fluid that contains the brains of the city's dead Mind Flayers. Okay, now in this instance, it is a fluid that has all of the brains just in it. In later editions, the Elder Brain becomes a single organism brain that is enormous. Okay, Elder Brain is still sentient. Telepathic union of its brains rules the community. Elder Brain has telepathic range of 2 to 5 miles. It doesn't attack, but telepathically warns the Mind Flayers of the presence of thinking creatures. Mind Flayers have no family structure, and that's because they have a weird form of reproduction, which we will look at later. And it's one of the creepy things about this that you can use to really totally creep out your players if you're going to have them encounter Mind Flayers. Mind Flayers are arrogant, viewing all their species as cattle to be fed upon. They prefer to eat the brains of thinking creatures. Lifespan is about 125 years. Warm-blooded amphibians spend the first 10 years of life as tadpoles, swimming in the Elder Brain pool until they either die or grow into adult Illithids. Okay, that was what they said about their life cycle in 2nd edition. Not so fast, my friend. That's not the same anymore. So let's take a look at 3rd edition, where a lot of the lore of Mind Flayers really began to get fleshed out. Okay. Strange humanoid, stands about as tall as a human, and flesh is rubbery and greenish mauve, glistening with slime. Okay, they are insidious, diabolical, and powerful. Or they are so insidious, diabolical, and powerful that all denizens of the dark fear them. They bend others to their will and shatter enemies' minds. Mind Flayer's mouth, a revolting thing shaped like a lamprey's maw, and constantly drips an oily slime when it's not siphoning out the brains of living prey. Ugh. In addition to being high on intelligence, wholly evil, and terribly sadistic, Mind Flayers are utterly self-serving. If an encounter turns against a creature, it flees at once, caring nothing for the fate of its companions or servitors. All right, and here is the 3rd edition image of the Mind Flayer. They use the Mind Blast in combat, improved grab. They extract Mind Flayer that begins its turns with all 4 tentacles attached and makes a successful grapple check, automatically extracts the opponent's brain, instantly killing that creature. Power is useless against constructs, elementals, oozes, plants, and undead. It is not instantly fatal to foes with multiple heads, such as Ettins and Hydras. Okay, telepathy. A Mind Flayer can communicate telepathically with any other creature within 100 feet that has a language. And then there's Mind Flayer sorcerers, all this, and then you have 2 different types of Mind Flayer, 2 different flavors of Mind Flayer, if you will, in 3rd edition. The Mind Flayer and the Mind Flayer sorcerer. All right. Then we go into talking about Mind Flayer society. And then there's Mind Flayer characteristics. Now here's a really cool thing that you can use. Once again, this is a reason, DMs, that you might want to go to the DMs Guild website and start building your collection of old resource books, because in the monster manual for 3rd edition, they like to give you, especially for intelligent monsters, they like to give you tactics that a monster would use round by round in combat. So now that doesn't mean that you have to do that. But if you're trying to figure out how would this thing fight, this is kind of a good template to use. So it would open with its Mind Blast. If the party is stunned, it uses Charm Monster on a remaining foe. If most of the party is not stunned, maintain distance and use Mind Blast again. And then round 3, if fewer than 2 foes remain unstunned, order any charmed foes to protect you. Grapple a stunned foe with tentacles. Majority of the party remains unstunned, flee using levitate or, if necessary, plane shift. And if still in a position of strength in round 4, start eating brains. Use charmed foes to guard you. If position of weakness, use plane shift. So they're like, if you are running a Mind Flayer in combat and the party's directly fighting it, then 4 rounds, you should either be starting to feast on stunned PCs, or you should be out of there. Don't let the combat go on, because it is not going to stay around to face possible death. Mind Flayer works well as a boss monster. If it has minions, varies its tactics to suit the situation. So dispatch the minions with orders to assault foes from one side of the battlefield. Use levitate and cover to have a safe command position, preferably out of obvious sight. Round 1, put the minions into optimal positions using telepathy. Use Mind Blast on foes without hitting minions if possible. But remember, all of your minions are expendable. Battlefield is too congested, use Charm Monster or Suggestion to sow confusion in your foes. Identify enemy spellcasters and order minions telepathically to assault them at all costs. Focus spell-like abilities on lesser foes. Order charmed foes towards you telepathically, grapple them. Have minions keep uncharmed, unstunned foes busy. And then round 4, feast on brains. Okay, so a really cool kind of idea of how you could run a combat, and that works with any edition. It's not just limited to 3rd edition. You can take those tactics and put it to any game you're running where you have a Mind Flayer. Now, this book is also from this is the 3rd edition Fiend Folio, also from DM's Guild, that you can get. Now, how Illithids make more Illithids. Mind Flayer life cycle. Begin their lives as tiny tadpoles in a briny pool. To reach maturity, tadpole undergoes a transformative process called Ceremorphosis. It begins when a tadpole is inserted into the brain case of a host human or humanoid, usually via the ear canal. The tadpole burrows into its victim's brain, quickly consuming much of the gray matter and replacing the consumed brain with its own squalid tissue. In effect, the tadpole melds with the uneaten lower brainstem of the victim, wiping out all the remnants of the personality and spirit of the host while leaving the physical body alive and ready for habitation. Within days, additional morphological transformations complete the maturation process of an adult Illithid. So that Mind Flayer that you are fighting now, that might actually be your missing Uncle Joe, who went into the Underdark 10 years ago and was never heard from again. He might now be a Mind Flayer if he was captured and if he was used to become a host. Think about that. Now think about how you might use that as a hook in a campaign if you're a DM. Just that you are just going to throw missing family members at your party. You know, it's like, oh, that Mind Flayer is wearing my Uncle Joe's boots. Mind Flayer is your Uncle Joe. Luke, I am your father. So that is that's a really interesting way that you can use Mind Flayers, and this is a super creepy way that they reproduce. And this is not even the best of it. Wait until you see some of the other stuff that we uncovered when we were researching this. Now, also out of the 3rd edition Fiend Folio, there was a feat in 3rd edition called Graft Flesh. That feat doesn't exist in the rules for 5th edition, but there's nothing that says that it can't exist in your game. Especially if it's a feat that monsters get that the PCs don't have access to. Okay, Illithid Grafts, where you can actually graft different types of things onto a monster that is a thrall or a servant or is dominated by Mind Flayers. So the antennae graft. Pair of long antennae sprout from the grafted creature's head, and hundreds of inch-long hairs are embedded into its shoulders and arms. What that does is that gives the grafted creature tremor sense, allowing it to sense the location of anything within 60 feet that's in contact with the ground. Then climbing legs. They jut out from the creature's body. Each one has a knee that bends to the creature's side and ends in a splayed foot with large sticky pads that 4 toes. And it strongly resembles the legs and feet of a gecko. A creature can walk up walls and even upside down on ceilings. A goring horn alters the entire facial structure of the creature, lengthening the face into a bestial muzzle and attaching a long, sharp horn. Like some kind of hideous, dark, twisted version of a unicorn, but not necessarily made out of a horse, made out of anything. Could even be made out of a humanoid. So imagine that you're fighting a grafted gnoll. Okay, so this kind of already bestial humanoid thing, and then it has this big twisted horn that that it's going to come in and fight you with. Grasping mandibles. A huge pair of chitinous mandibles, strongly resembling those of an Umber Hulk, grafted to either side of the creature's mouth. And a hauling back. Contorts and strengthens the creature's spine and back muscles, forcing it to stoop low enough to use its hands while walking. Raking tentacles, rending claws, weapon grafts, all those are different types of flesh grafts that a Mind Flayer might give a creature that has been dominated. All right, now I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because we did an entire Monster Monday a few months ago about this creature, but there is the Alhoon, which is an Illithid Lich. That is an Illithid who has passed into Lichdom. An Illithid or Mind Flayer wizard who studied the spells and did the rituals to become a Lich. So imagine something that has the powers of both a Lich and a Mind Flayer melded together. Ugh. That's not super creepy. I don't know what is. And that could be like a super high level opponent for your in your campaign, if you're doing a whole campaign. You're going to see here, we'll talk about it a little bit later, how you can build an entire campaign whose animating antagonists all the way from level 1 to level 20 are one or more forms of Mind Flayer. And it's up to you to figure out what their goals are, what they're trying to do, how they are opposing the party or threatening either the party directly or the civilization that the party is a part of. But you could just build an entire campaign around that as with at every phase of your story where there's some kind of Mind Flayer that is the antagonist or the boss that is behind, pulling the strings, and then you keep going up to more and more powerful versions of Mind Flayers as you go along. All right, so in 4th edition is completely different, but Mind Flayers, they existed here too, and there were 2 different kinds of Mind Flayers. There was a Mind Flayer Infiltrator, which is a level 14 Lurker, and a Mind Flayer Mastermind, which is a level 18 Elite Controller. And so they have their tentacle attacks, the bore into brain, the mind blast, stalk the senseless. Mind Flayer is invisible to dazed or stunned creatures. And here are some of their tactics. Once again, this is a cool thing. They give you tactics for these monsters in the 4th edition Monster Manual. You can completely ignore all the stat blocks and other things, but if you have these resources, you can kind of look at these and say, oh, okay, well, how would this thing fight? And of course, those tactics can be adapted to your own game, your own table. Mind Flayer uses natural stealth to creep toward its enemies unseen, unleashes its Mind Blast, chooses a creature to attack with its tentacles while relying on its stalk the senseless to avoid attacks. It grabs the victim, it will bore into the brain until the victim dies or manages to free itself. And then you have the Mastermind, which has all the same attacks and a bunch more. When the Mastermind devours a brain, not only does it kill the target, but the Mastermind regains 25 hit points. Then it can use a charm ability to create a thrall. So it doesn't devour the brain, but instead it turns the victim into a thrall. It can enslave with a form of charm by dominating other creatures. Illusion of Pain, which is psychic damage to its enemies. Cradle of the Elder Brain, which is a short-range teleportation attack. Interpose Thrall, which is it redirects an attack at an adjacent thrall. So that's another reason that these masterminds might have thralls. Not to have them do anything except just literally be meat shields. That when some enemy tries to attack it, it just says, nope, you're not. Your attack doesn't go against me, it goes against this poor schmuck over here. Alright, so throughout combat, Mastermind remains adjacent to at least one of its thralls, just for that specific reason. Then, in 4th edition, they also give you a bunch of lore about it. Mind Flayer lore. They bend others to their will, wield powers that shatter the minds of their foes, communicate via telepathy. They also understand deep speech, which is undercommon in 5th edition. Mind Flayers are solitary masterminds who manipulate hosts of weak-willed thralls. Sometimes they gather in small cabals of like-minded individuals. Horrible cities and kingdoms. Mind Flayers are organized around mighty disembodied intellects known as Elder Brains. And they begin life as a small tentacled tadpole, parasite that invades the skull of a helpless humanoid victim, devours its brain, and subverts the body to its own will. Alright. And now, 5th edition, we have our garden variety Mind Flayer, who has magic resistance, innate spell casting with psionics, uses detect thoughts and levitate on itself at will, and then once per day it can dominate monster or plane shift for itself only. And the dominate monster, that is the more powerful version of dominate person, because it allows you to dominate anything, not just a humanoid. The tentacle attack deals psychic damage, and if the target is medium or smaller, it's grappled and must succeed on a DC 15 intelligence saving throw or be stunned until the grapple ends. Then extract brain. One incapacitated humanoid grappled by the Mind Flayer takes 10d10 piercing damage. And if that damage reduces the target to 0 hit points, Mind Flayer kills the target by extracting and devouring its brain. Now, because of the CR of these monsters, which is CR 7, if you have a party that it's going to be a challenge to send them up against a Mind Flayer, a 4th or 5th level party, somewhere around that range, dealing 10d10 damage is almost enough to, potentially is enough to kill any 4th or 5th level character. Just about. I mean, there are going to be some that have enough hit points and whatnot, and of course you could always roll poorly on your 10d10 and do a low amount of damage. But if you get a good roll, that's up to 100 hit points worth of damage, and there's not many 5th level characters. I don't care whether they're barbarians that have all kinds of extra constitution and stuff like that, it's going to be hard for them to have 100 hit points at 5th level or 6th level. So then you have the Mind Blast ability, and this is straight out of the older editions. 60-foot cone, 48 plus 4 psychic damage, and stuns the opponents for 1 minute if they fail their intelligence save. Okay, and then it talks a little bit about some of this stuff, but that's not the real interesting thing on Mind Flayers in 5th edition. No. In Volo's Guide to Monsters, one of the cultures that he talks about is Mind Flayers as a scourge of world. They are horrific alien humanoids, lurk deep within the Underdark. They're a culture of fugitives. Despite their unique and overwhelming abilities, they're a race on the edge of extinction. This is where it talks about their former dominance of the inner planes, their great traveling ships called nautiloids, and how they had enslaved the entire Gith race. And when the Gith broke free, they of course have split into the Githyanki, the evil Githyanki space pirates, and the Githzerai, the more noble monastic type of either good or neutral Gith. There's lost colonies. Speculation persists. Mind Flayer realms yet adrift in the astral plane. Nobody has found them. Well, your party might find them, and then they could be in for a great deal of adventure or a great deal of trouble. Then there's Mind Flayer Scions. Mind Flayers sometimes devote themselves to deeper study of psionic power, and here are some variants that you can use. Give them a whole bunch of spells at the various different levels. Importance of brains. When a Mind Flayer devours a brain, it acquires stray memories from its victim and shares them with the other members of its colony. They receive a degree of sustenance from the physical substance of the brain, but subsist primarily on the psionic energy that they extract from the final moment of activity. And then talks about the Ceremorphosis, and here's a disturbing image of how one of those tadpoles enters the cranial cavity of a victim to begin the process of eating the brain. Okay, the Elder Brain. We said that it's a different idea of a brain. In 5th edition, the Elder Brain is a single huge, massive brain, as depicted here. So you have this thing encased in an artificial cocoon and being carried around by a bunch of slave creatures. I think these are supposed to be Grimlocks or something like that are pulling it around. And that is the center of the Illithid colony. Now, of course, it has this protective crystal case on it, but without that, it doesn't have any physical defenses. So, if you have a campaign that features an Illithid colony, maybe part of the goal is to go in and destroy the Elder Brain, which means that you've got to deal with all of the Mind Flayers and all of their enslaved thralls that are trying to defend it, and then finally get to the Elder Brain and physically destroy the Elder Brain. Now, there's renegade Illithids, and this is kind of like, D&D, the authors of D&D, they draw so much from the realm of nature. It's kind of like, this is kind of reminiscent of things like either bee colonies or termite colonies or things like that, where the Elder Brain is kind of in the role of a queen, and then from time to time a Mind Flayer that's away from its colony breaks free from the Elder Brain, and in that case it begins to develop and become more powerful, and then eventually it will draw other Mind Flayers to itself, and it will evolve into an Elder Brain that will establish a new colony, and those usually are anywhere from 10 to 100 miles away from an existing colony. So then it talks about all the enemies of the Mind Flayers, and the grand design, which is the Mind Flayers' plan to rebuild their lost empire. They know that reclaiming their rightful place in the world is possible only after the Githzerai and Githyanki have been eliminated. and remaining humanoids have been turned into docile slaves. So now here's an idea for a campaign seed. You know, everybody agrees that the Githyanki are a bunch of evil dudes. They go around, they're slavers, they do that. What if somebody who's actually the thrall of a Mind Flayer, who is in some sort of position of modest political power and maybe wealth, maybe they hire the party as low-level adventurers and say, hey, there's been some Githyanki activity. You should go and you should destroy those Githyanki over there. But maybe the real reason that they want those Githyanki destroyed is because those Githyanki are hunting for Mind Flayers. And so you could sort of have the party being caught between, you know, hunting the Githyanki on behalf of the Mind Flayers, or if they figure out what the Githyanki are really up to, might they want to, in some perverse way, team up with these evil Githyanki space pirates and try to go after the Mind Flayers? That's the kind of a campaign seed that could just immediately has a built-in fork, and your players can run with it, and they can choose whichever way it goes. And of course, your players might say, screw both of these guys. We're going to kill the Githyanki, then we're going to go and kill the Mind Flayers too. You know, they could decide to sort of play it that way. And so you have, as a DM, you have a wonderful little sort of limited sandbox there that you can let your players play in, which is really fun. Now, I also did some research on the Forgotten Realms Wiki, and this is a great site where you can go and find lore about all kinds of monsters. And the most interesting thing I found here that wasn't in any of the core source books from the earlier editions, but I think this must be drawn from either some extended universe sources or published adventures or things like that that have come out over the years throughout the editions. There's Illithid monsters. Mind Flayers constantly experiment with transforming other creatures and implanting their tadpoles into different races, producing a large variety of thralls. So this goes back to the Ceremorphosis. Now, we've said that in classic Ceremorphosis, you have to have that tadpole go into the brain of a humanoid. But what if instead of a humanoid, that tadpole went into the brain of a different creature like a dragon? Then you'd come up with a brain stealer dragon. So just imagine, if you will, a creature with the physical characteristics and capabilities of a dragon, but that also has the psionic and brain hunger of a Mind Flayer. Now, would that not be some sort of cool thing to throw against your party just to really creep them the hell out? And you know, go find some artwork for that, because golly, that's just incredible. Then there's gnome ceremorphs. A result of implanting a tadpole into a gnome, only viable by slightly warping the ceremorphosis process. And if successful, or if unsuccessful, resulting creature is a gnome squidling. Mind Witness, implanting a tadpole in a captured beholder. Okay, so beholder with eye stalks and brain-hungry tentacles. Oh my gosh. Now, do you see where we're going with you could have an entire campaign with an arc built around different kinds of boss monsters that are Mind Flayers or Mind Flayer variants? Mazgraken, you insert the tadpole into a deep gnome and subject it to psychic surgery that channel energy from the Shadowfell. Zakandi, result of tadpole being inserted into a lizard folk. The Achulon, result of a chul being implanted with a tadpole. Europhion, a roper that had survived tadpole implantation. A brain golem, a cranium rat. Now, of course, now here are some of the other monsters, some of these that are kind of familiar. So cranium rats, they're giant rats that have exposed brains, and they are psychic, and they have some psychic charming capabilities that they sometimes use against humanoids. Intellect devourers, subjecting a slave's brain to a ritual that causes it to sprout legs, employed as guards or bait to lure outsiders into a colony. A mind worm resembles a pale, smaller purple worm. They're capable of attacking creatures through any reflective surface, even across different planes. A nerve swimmer, modification of an immature tadpole. Nyrala golem, partially humanoid construct that did not require tissue of the elder brain. An oblex is a psionic ooze. So there's actually oblex exists as a monster in 5th edition, and that is a really weird creature indeed. You know, it's kind of like a green slime or a black pudding that will devour and turn flesh into more of itself, but when it does, it actually kind of gains the memories and the psychic energy of the people or the creatures that have been thus converted into the oblex, and so it's weirdly intelligent, which is like totally creepy. The Alhoon we've talked about is the Lich Mind Flayer, and then there's vampiric Illithids, a feral undead Illithid that has vampiric powers. So yeah, it'll drink your blood and then it'll eat your brain. The brain is dinner after a meal of blood, or the brain is dessert after a meal of blood. Ugh. All right, so let's go back and take a look at the. Let's go back and take a look at at more of our slides here. Just a minute. Okay, so if you're going to have your players encounter a single Mind Flayer in a fight, for a party of 5 PCs at level 4, a single Mind Flayer is an extremely hard fight. In fact, it just is beyond the threshold of being a deadly fight. Now, I have personally found at my table that the threshold of deadly in the monster or in the DM's guide is a little low. I think that really is designed for players that don't really know a whole lot about what they're doing. If you have very new players that maybe it's their first time ever playing through D&D and they don't understand kind of the way synergies between classes and spells and martial combat and that kind of stuff works, it might be deadly. But I would say it's going to be very hard against most level 4 parties. A level 5 party, it's a medium encounter. If you want to make it a hard encounter, you can add an intellect devourer. At level 6, it's an easy encounter. You can add 2 intellect devourers. If the party is above level 6, well, you probably want to have multiple Mind Flayers and maybe some other types of thralls. So the Mind Flayer might be sort of the boss monster, or the Mind Flayers might be the boss monsters, and the rest of the thralls would sort of soften up the party before the Mind Flayers actually would have to get involved in combat. All right. Now, if you're a party and you're going to fight against a Mind Flayer, what are some of the tactics that you want to be aware of, and what do you want to plan for and figure out how you're going to mitigate? Well, one is, or the most important thing, is the domination ability. Once per day, Mind Flayer can use Dominate Monster to mentally control any creature. It's a Wisdom save, DC 15. Now, because Mind Flayers are really smart, they are probably going to look across the battlefield and gauge who the character is that has the least wisdom, and they're probably going to try to dominate them because they are probably also physically big, strong, and powerful. So you take that low wisdom PC and you turn that PC against the rest of the party. Another thing to watch out for is the Psionic Blast, a mental weapon that blasts a cone of psionic energy. It's as powerful and dangerous as the breath weapon of a small dragon. It deals 48 damage in 5th edition. Now, in 5th edition, that particular attack will also potentially stun an enemy that fails its save for up to a minute. So Mind Flayers are also magic resistant. They have advantage on saves against spells and magical effects. So be aware of that. If you're going to cast a spell against them, be aware that if it gets a saving throw, it's got advantage on that. Now, if it's a spell that uses an attack roll, well, it can't use that. It can't use that advantage on its saves. Brain extraction. When the Mind Flayer grapples an enemy with its face tentacles, can attempt to extract a brain, which can easily kill most Tier 1 characters on a successful hit, as we've already seen. Alright, now, turn the tables, 5th edition, and we're just going by the book 5th edition version of the Mind Flayer. If you're going to use a Mind Flayer as a DM, keep in mind Mind Flayers are ruthless, sadistic, and elusive. Play the Mind Flayer as a cunning predator that will have studied its prey before attacking. So that means that because you have access to the character sheets of your players, you know everything that the players have at their disposal. So use all of that information. Presume that the Mind Flayer would have studied them and would have that knowledge somehow. You don't have to explain how it knows it, but just consider that it knows it. It knows what you know. So you can open with its Dominate Monster. Find that barbarian, the barbarian that has the 8 wisdom, and go to dominate that one, and then turn that guy against the other party members to disrupt, confuse, and distract the party while you go and do more of your own attacks. So that dominated PC is a weapon to attack and perhaps subdue other party members. Better still, have it lure the entire party, where the Mind Flayer can use its Mind Blast attack to stun all of them for up to a minute, and take its pick of the choicest, most intelligent brain to devour with its tentacle and extract brain attacks. And after it's dined, or if the fight goes bad, save the plane shift spell to escape and plot revenge against the heroes. So yeah, that plane shift, as we were seeing in 3rd edition, where it kind of gave you, in all scenarios, it was like, okay, by round 4, you should either be dining on brains or you should plane shift the heck out of dodge. And that holds true here. So open with a big attack, punch hard, try to stun, grab a meal, and then, the best part about it would be stunning the entire party, choosing one of them, devouring their brain while the others watch helplessly, and then just smile at them as you plane shift away. Oh my gosh, talk about a recurring enemy that they are going to want to hunt down. Okay, now they know why the Githyanki hunt these guys so much. Oh yeah, um, if it just ate the brain of your friend, you're not going to let that go unpunished. You're going to hunt that guy down and make him pay. All right, so where would you place this in campaigns? Well, as we said before, the real answer to that is anywhere. You can place it at any level because of just the huge variety of Illithid enemies, whether they be single Illithids, an entire colony in the Elder Brain, or all these kind of weird offshoots, everything from the Alhoon, the Mind Flayer Lich, to that Mind Flayer dragon, the Brain Stealer dragon that we were talking about. You could have any of those be enemies at any tier of adventuring throughout the campaign. So Illithids are always a potential danger when the party travels to the Astral Sea or the Underdark. Huge colonies, several hundred individuals, all telepathically linked, loosely by an Elder Brain. And then once the colony's secure, it focuses on the grand design. They're trying to rebuild that lost empire. Okay, there's a thread. You can pull on that thread and make that part of an arc of your campaign. There's a Mind Flayer colony that's gotten established in this part of your game world. And they want to try to rebuild their lost empire from this colony, and because they're feeling kind of good about themselves. They've been here for 500 years and nobody has discovered them. So now they're starting to flex their muscle. They're starting to reach out. Okay, but as soon as they do, enterprising bunch of adventurers hears about some strange goings on and they go to investigate. All right, so then at low levels, the party might stumble on a Mind Flayer research outpost and free some test subjects, meaning that the Illithids will be watching the party both to eliminate a threat and to get revenge. And that can set up a later showdown against the Elder Brain and Mind Flayers that make up its particular colony. So all kinds of ways you can place Mind Flayers in a campaign, and the way you can use them, and the way you can build an entire storyline, an entire arc for a whole campaign around this monster. It's one of the few monsters that you can have be a recurring villain, staying in the same family of monster all the way from level 1 through level 20. All right, now how could you reskin the Mind Flayer? Well, I really struggle with this. So I kind of went outside the lore of D&D for some inspiration here. So they have a really alien-looking morphology. In appearance, they seem almost something like they're inspired by or adjacent to the Cthulhu mythos of Lovecraft. So having them be some kind of nightmare stalker could be very effective. So keep that whole psionic thing, but instead of having them actually feed on physical brains, have them feed on the psionic energy of very specific brain activities, such as nightmares. So, like, maybe you go to a place where people are just living in existential fear of what happens when they go to sleep at night. So you could then kind of pull from things like the Nightmare on Elm Street and whatnot, but you don't have to physically kill the NPCs with nightmares. You might have the effects of the nightmares turn out to be sprees of murder. Okay, so people are sleepless. So that means they're agitated. That means some people just kind of go crazy and kill their neighbors, kill their family, kill people that they get into arguments with on the street, whatever. So that's one idea that you could use. Reskin them as sort of psychic instigators and nightmare propagators. So in another campaign, you might turn them from monster predators to monster makers. Instead of eating brains, they insert thoughts via a psionic injection to turn normal people into assassins that can be activated in the future by some psionic signal. So that could be like the D&D equivalent of a sleeper cell terror group that may wait months or years to be activated for attacks on their adopted culture or country. So in this case, you would have Mind Flayers maybe be something on the akin of they'd be like what am I trying to say? They'd be like the psionic version of like an Al Qaeda or an ISIS or something like that, where they psionically dominate, recruit, condition, and then release back into the culture these sort of sleeper people that have been primed to carry out certain heinous acts. And mercenary, that's what I was trying to think of. But instead of having like their own political agenda, they could do this maybe for the highest bidder, and they could be like at the service of criminal underworld organizations. So they might, there's a criminal underworld organization, let's say in Baldur's Gate, and they don't like the person who is the head of the council that runs Baldur's Gate. So they may go and they may pay off a bunch of the Mind Flayers in your campaign to go and recruit in air quotes, kidnap somebody out of the court of that official, implant thoughts into their brain, send them back, and then at a specified point in time, or when that person does, when that official does something in particular, it triggers, and that person that has been recruited will go into mode and assassinate that official. And of course, no direct involvement by the Mind Flayers, no direct involvement by the people that had them train the assassin, but it's an incredible plot hook and a great way for the players then to have an entree. Well, what made that do that? And then through clues they uncover, they can trace it back to these Mind Flayers that are doing that. So you answer the question, what's the ideology or purpose behind the shadowy group? Maybe the elder range feeds on visceral raw emotions like fear and hatred. Illithid colonists sow these by means of injecting them in the brains of other humanoids. So all kinds of different ways that you could reskin these and still keep that theme of them being, psychological terrors, but change them from being people or creatures that feed on physical brains to creatures that feed on either the emotions or certain kinds of brainwave activity. And they induce that through either by being paid to manipulate people or by just, mentally sowing discord among a civilization. All right, so let's go over to the chat and take a look and see what questions we have. Hey, Skylin, thanks for joining us. So what questions do you have at the about Mind Flayers that we haven't covered yet so far? Anything that you would like to know about how you could use these in a campaign, or what you could do with the Mind Flayer? All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and go into the wrap up, and then I'll double check the chat again to see if there's any questions on that. All right, so this has been our deep dive, and it really has been a deep dive, over an hour tonight, into Mind Flayer and all the different things about the Mind Flayer, the different ways that you can use a Mind Flayer in your campaign, and how Mind Flayers can be enemies at all different levels of a campaign and sort of form the backbone of the antagonist for a campaign. If you want to check out the actual play games that I run, you can be on my Twitch channel Sunday afternoons, 2 p.m. for the Walker of Waterdeep. That's a Planeswalking 5th edition game. Thursday nights we do the Sword Coast Chronicles, which is a 5th edition survey, if you will, of the published campaigns that have come out from Wizards of the Coast. Then on Saturday nights, we're getting close to wrapping up the Lost Mine of original D&D. That is a playthrough of the Lost Mine of Phandelver, but setting it or playing it with the rule set of original D&D. The original rules as dreamed up by Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax back in the 1970s. Those all happen over on the twitch.tv/Galabon channel. Then over on the YouTube channel, you can find the archives of all of those. Plus, you can find many hundreds of other videos that I have created about different aspects of D&D, from all of the past Monster Mondays we've done to deep dives on spells, weapons, armor, lore about different adventures that are parts of published campaigns, and how you can use those in your own homebrew campaigns. And we talked about a bunch of the different feats and the skills that are in D&D, and sort of a history, how those relate to things in older editions of the game. All right. And that's there on YouTube. Then, of course, there's a Patreon. If you really love what we're doing and you want to help us do more, we'd love to see you join us on the Patreon there. All right, so let me go back and check to see. All right, no questions. So I am going to go ahead and thank you guys for joining us tonight. And I am going to bring the music back up a little bit, and then we're going to go and raid somebody else. Here on the Galabond channel, we are now part of the Game Rebel Network, and so at the end of every one of my streams, I like to go and show some love to some other Game Rebel members. So while I let you have a look at the credits, we are going to go ahead and look for somebody to raid. All right, so let me go turn the music back up. Okay, so we'll do this, and then we'll go over here, and we'll bring this back up. All right. Alright, so we're going to go and we're going to raid Mad Shorter. She's right now playing Hunt Showdown, and so let's go see how her game is going, and everybody have a great week, and we will talk to you next time on Monster Monday. We hope we'll see you. Hope we'll see you next time, and for some of our other streams that we have coming up here. So let me make sure I have this. Manager, right? I do. Okay. All right. Tell Shorter I said hello. Talk to you later. Take care.